So, after the South Australian election, Pauline Hanson from One Nation sat down for this, well, pretty fiery interview. She basically laid out her party's whole game plan, their view of the political world, and what they're demanding. What we're going to do here is break down that conversation to really get at what's driving One Nation, and maybe more importantly, what they're actually planning to do next.
All right, start with this quote right here, because it's pretty much the key to understanding everything she's saying. People are turning to One Nation because they're fed up with the major political parties. See, she's arguing that her party's support, it's not just about policy. It's really fueled by this deep frustration with the whole political establishment. This idea of being fed up, that's the lens she sees everything through.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at that election result that kind of put One Nation back in the spotlight. Then, we'll dig into who they say they're fighting for, what their agenda actually is, that complicated relationship they have with the Liberals, and then the big one. What does Pauline Hanson really want in exchange for her support? Let's get into it. All right, first up, that stunning result, as she put it, in South Australia. The interview really kicked off trying to figure out, just how well did One Nation actually do at the polls? So, what does success even look like for them in this election? Well, even though the final votes are still being tallied, Hanson's got her eyes on a big prize, 3 seats in the state's upper house. Now, she's also hopeful for a few lower house seats, but she admits it all comes down to preferences. Where voters' second and third choices get shuffled around. It's basically a waiting game, but you can tell One Nation is feeling pretty good right now. Okay, so if One Nation is picking up steam, who exactly is voting for them? Well, Hanson has a very, very clear answer for that. She says she's fighting a battle for the forgotten Australians. And Hanson, she really draws a sharp line in the sand here. It's like this. On one side, you've got the elitists. That's the major parties, who she says have totally lost their way. And then on the other side, you have the average person, who she claims feels completely forgotten and is now looking to One Nation as, well, their only champion. And look, this isn't just some abstract idea for her. She says she can feel it on the ground. And what's really interesting is she points to a lot of support coming from young people. She says they want to get their country back, back to a place with more traditional family values, less crime, and that simple dream of actually being able to own a home. It's a classic populist message aimed right at the heart of anyone who feels left behind. Okay, so if that's who they're fighting for, what do they actually stand for? Well, this is where Hanson argues that One Nation isn't just some minor party. She claims they're a major force in national politics and that they've taken credit for shifting the entire conversation on some really big issues. And this is the proof she puts on the table. She claims One Nation was the very first to oppose The Voice, that they led the charge against mass migration, and have always been against net zero. She even takes credit for pushing the Senate inquiry that eventually led to that huge banking royal commission. The argument she's making is pretty simple. One Nation sets the agenda, and the big parties just end up following their lead. And all of this brings us to what might be the most, well, let's call it complicated topic in the whole interview: One Nation's relationship with the Liberal Party. It's intense. Yeah, the interviewer really put it to her bluntly, asking if her party was the reason the Liberals did so poorly in South Australia, basically accusing her of helping Labor win by splitting the Conservative vote. So the big question is she to blame? Hanson's response, it was absolutely blunt. No messing around. She just completely rejected the whole idea, arguing that whatever happened to the Liberal Party, well, it's their own fault. In her mind, they've only got themselves to blame. So why does she think that? Her reasoning is that the Liberals have just completely abandoned their base. She calls them Labor light and says they've drifted so far to the left that they don't even represent conservative voters anymore. She argues that on huge issues like net zero and The Voice, One Nation literally had to drag them back to a more conservative stance, all because the Liberals, in her view, have lost their way. So, this all brings us to the final and maybe the most critical question of all. If the major parties are failing, and if One Nation holds the balance of power, what's their price? What does Pauline Hanson actually want? In her terms, they are crystal clear. She's willing to prop up a Liberal government in 2 really important ways. First, she'll guarantee supply, which just means she'll let them pass their budget so the government can run. Second, she'll guarantee confidence, which means she won't vote to bring them down. But, and this is a big but, her conditions are just as important. There will be no formal coalition. And there will be no ministerial jobs for her or her party. She says she refuses to be shut down in cabinet and would much rather stay independent on the crossbench where she can keep pushing her own agenda.
And that really leaves us with this final thought to chew on. The whole interview is built on this one idea, that a huge chunk of voters are just plain fed up. So it really makes you wonder, right? In a political system that's so dominated by two major parties, what is the real role of a party like One Nation? Are they some kind of vital pressure valve for all that frustration, forcing the mainstream to actually listen? Or do they risk just fracturing politics even more, making it that much harder to get a stable government? It's a question that really gets to the heart of where we are politically right now.